Hi scary lovers, welcome to today's video. Let's unravel the spooky side of life through the lens of a storyteller. Join me on my journey as I dive into chilling tales and true crime mysteries. Reflections of fear. Emily had always led a quiet life in her small town. She worked at the local library, immersed in books and the worlds they created. One evening, as she was closing up, she noticed a peculiar book tucked away in a corner. Its leather cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age. Intrigued, she opened it, revealing a collection of unsettling stories about doppelgangers, mysterious doubles that could bring misfortune and chaos. After reading a few entries, Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The stories spoke of individuals encountering their doppelgangers, only for their lives to spiral into darkness. She dismissed the tales as mere folklore, shrugged off the unease, and headed home. The following day, Emily noticed something strange about her reflection. It seemed slightly off, a flicker of movement that didn't quite match her own. She brushed it off as fatigue, but the feeling lingered. As the week progressed, Emily's unease grew. She began to see glimpses of a woman who looked just like her, standing at the edge of her vision, always disappearing when she turned to look closely. It was unsettling, but she convinced herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. One night, while preparing for bed, Emily caught sight of her doppelganger in the hallway mirror. The woman mirrored her movements but wore a sinister smile that sent shivers down Emily's spine. Heart racing, she turned away, hoping it was merely an illusion. But the next morning, she found a note on her desk, written in her own handwriting. "I'm coming for you." Panic set in as Emily realized the danger she was in. She tried to avoid mirrors, but the doppelganger seemed to be everywhere. At the library, in the reflection of shop windows, even in her dreams. Each encounter drained her energy and twisted her thoughts, filling her with dread. Desperate for answers, Emily returned to the library and searched for more information about doppelgangers. She discovered that the legend spoke of a way to confront them, a ritual that required the person to face their double and declare their existence null. It was risky, but it was her only hope. That night, armed with a candle and the ancient book, Emily set up a small mirror in her dimly lit living room. Her heart raced as she lit the candle, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She took a deep breath and called for her doppelganger to appear. Moments later, the air grew cold, and there she was, the exact replica of Emily, standing behind her in the mirror. The double wore that same unsettling smile, eyes glinting with malice. "Why are you afraid?" the doppelganger asked, her voice a chilling echo of Emily's own. "You're nothing without me." Gritting her teeth, Emily stepped closer to the mirror, her reflection wavering. "You don't belong here. I am real, and you are nothing." The doppelganger laughed, a sound that twisted Emily's insides. "We are one and the same. You can't escape me." Fueled by fear and determination, Emily repeated the incantation from the book, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. With each word, she felt the doppelganger's presence weaken, the reflection flickering like a dying flame. "No, you can't do this," the double screamed, her smile fading into a snarl. Emily shouted the final words, and the mirror shattered with a deafening crack. Shards flew through the air, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, silence enveloped the room. Exhausted, Emily stood amidst the broken glass, her heart pounding. She felt different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. But when she glanced at the remaining pieces of the mirror, she noticed a small shard still reflecting her image. This time, there was no doppelganger, just Emily. Relieved yet wary, she turned away from the mirror, vowing never to let her guard down again. As she walked to her bedroom, a fleeting thought crossed her mind. Was her doppelganger truly gone, or had she only been temporarily silenced? The darkness held its breath, waiting for the next opportunity. The Forbidden Room. In a small, forgotten town stood an old Victorian house that had long been the subject of local legends. The townsfolk whispered tales of the Forbidden Room, a mysterious attic space that was said to be cursed, holding dark secrets from its past. Despite the warnings, curiosity gnawed at Jessica, a brave young woman who had recently moved to the town. One rainy afternoon, while exploring the dusty corners of her new home, Jessica stumbled upon a wooden door at the end of a narrow hallway. It was partially concealed by cobwebs, and the air around it felt thick with an unsettling energy. A faded sign hung on the door, the words barely legible, "Do not enter." Intrigued and defiant, Jessica felt a pull toward the forbidden space. She hesitated for a moment, recalling the warnings of the townsfolk, but her desire to uncover the secrets of the house was stronger. With a deep breath, she turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, filled with dust and shadows. Old furniture lay covered in white sheets, and the air was heavy with the scent of mildew. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface tarnished and cracked. Jessica felt an inexplicable urge to approach it, despite a voice in her mind warning her to turn back. As she gazed into the mirror, she noticed something strange. The reflection not only showed her own image but also revealed a darker, twisted version of herself standing behind her. A shadowy figure with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. Jessica's heart raced, and she stepped back, but the figure remained, its malicious smile growing wider. "Come closer," it whispered, its voice a chilling echo that sent shivers down her spine. "I've been waiting for you." Fighting the urge to flee, Jessica demanded, "What do you want from me?" The figure in the mirror leaned closer, its face distorting into a grotesque mask of malice. "I want to be free. You hold the key." Suddenly, the room grew colder, and the air crackled with energy. Jessica felt a surge of dread as the mirror pulsed with darkness. The shadows around her thickened, and she realized the room was alive with a malevolent force. Desperate to escape, Jessica turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panic set in as she pounded on the door, shouting for help that would never come. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of impending doom. "Join me," the figure beckoned, its voice now a sinister chant that echoed in her mind. "Embrace your darkness." In a moment of clarity, Jessica remembered the stories she had heard. The forbidden room was said to trap those who entered, feeding off their fear and despair. Determined not to succumb, she took a deep breath and faced the mirror once more. "I am not afraid of you," she shouted, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "You will not take me." With newfound resolve, Jessica stepped closer to the mirror, staring defiantly into the dark figure's eyes. "I refuse to let you control me," the figure screeched, its twisted face contorting in rage. The mirror cracked further, and a blinding light erupted from the center. Jessica shielded her eyes, feeling the energy of the room shift as the darkness fought to maintain its grip. As the light intensified, she reached out, her hand touching the glass. With a surge of strength, she shouted, "I reject you." The mirror shattered, sending shards flying in every direction. In that moment, the oppressive weight of the room lifted, and the door swung open, inviting her to escape. Jessica stumbled out, gasping for breath, the echoes of the malevolent whisper fading behind her. She ran down the hall, not daring to look back. As she reached the front door, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The forbidden room was behind her, its dark magic broken, but a lingering doubt remained. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that she had not completely escaped. The shadows in her room seemed to move, twisting and curling in the corners of her vision. She closed her eyes, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination. But deep within her mind, she heard a whisper that chilled her to the bone. "You may have escaped the room, but I am always with you." From that day on, Jessica lived with the knowledge that the darkness from the forbidden room had not been vanquished. It lingered in the shadows, waiting for the moment she would let her guard down, ready to reclaim her once again. Nightmare on the farm. The old Thompson farm had been abandoned for years, its fields overgrown and its barn crumbling. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the horrors that had once unfolded there. a family torn apart by a malevolent force that seemed to linger even after they were gone. But for Mark, a city boy eager for adventure, the tales only fueled his curiosity. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mark and his friends decided to explore the old farm, drawn by the thrill of the unknown. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravado, they made their way through the rusted gate, the wind howling as if warning them to turn back. As they approached the barn, the air grew thick with an unsettling energy. The door creaked open, revealing a darkened interior filled with shadows. Dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights, creating an eerie atmosphere. The friends exchanged nervous glances but pressed on, their laughter echoing in the empty space. Inside, they discovered remnants of a life once lived. A cracked milk jug, faded photographs, and old tools covered in cobwebs. Yet, something felt off. A chill crept down Mark's spine as he noticed strange symbols etched into the wooden beams, remnants of a dark ritual that had taken place long ago. "I think we should go," one of his friends suggested, an edge of fear in their voice. But Mark, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and curiosity, urged them to stay a little longer, convinced there was nothing to fear. As night fell, the atmosphere shifted. The wind howled outside, rattling the barn's walls, and a sense of dread settled over them. The group decided to play a game of truth or dare to lighten the mood. But when it was Mark's turn, he chose dare, eager to prove his bravery. "I dare you to go into the cornfield and shout your name 3 times," one friend challenged, a mischievous smile on their face. Mark hesitated, but the taunts pushed him forward. Armed with nothing but his flashlight, he stepped into the dark expanse of the cornfield, the towering stalks looming over him like sentinels. With each step, the air felt heavier, and the rustling of the leaves sounded like whispers, urging him to turn back. Taking a deep breath, he shouted, "Mark Thompson!" His voice echoed in the stillness, swallowed by the darkness. He called his name 2 more times, but as he finished, an unsettling silence enveloped him. Suddenly, the wind picked up, rustling the corn in a frenzied dance. Mark felt an icy grip on his heart as shadows began to shift among the stalks. Panic surged through him. "Guys, this isn't funny," he called out, but there was no response. Then he heard it, a low growl that sent shivers down his spine. The shadows writhed and twisted, coalescing into a dark figure that emerged from the cornfield. It was tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through him. Mark stumbled back, terror flooding his senses. "Mark Thompson!" It hissed, its voice a chilling echo. "You dared to awaken me." Heart racing, Mark turned and ran, the figure chasing him through the field. The corn stalks whipped against him as he dashed toward the barn, desperate for safety. He burst through the door, gasping for breath, but the darkness followed him inside, coiling around the walls like a living entity. His friends, now terrified, huddled together in the corner. "What happened out there?" one of them cried, eyes wide with fear. "There's something in the cornfield," Mark shouted, panic lacing his voice. "We need to get out of here." As they scrambled toward the exit, the shadows thickened, and the barn door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The air grew cold, and the whispers began again, echoing through the space. The friends backed against the wall, fear etched on their faces as the darkness closed in. "Join us," the figure from the cornfield murmured, its voice dripping with malice. "The farm needs new souls." Mark and his friends exchanged terrified glances, realizing that they were now part of the nightmare that had haunted the Thompson farm. With every ounce of courage, Mark shouted, "We won't let you take us. We're leaving." Summoning their strength, they charged at the door, pushing against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. The figure loomed closer, its laughter resonating in their ears, but they refused to give in. In a surge of determination, they slammed against the door one last time, and with a loud crack, it burst open. They tumbled out into the night, the cool air hitting their faces like a refreshing wave. The darkness receded, but the whispers continued to echo in their minds. They ran without looking back, the haunted farm fading into the distance. As they reached the safety of the main road, they paused to catch their breath, hearts pounding. The nightmare had come to an end, but the memory of that dark figure lingered in their minds. Weeks passed, and the friends vowed never to return to the Thompson farm. But the whispers haunted Mark's dreams, and he began to see shadows lurking in the corners of his vision. No matter where he went, he felt the presence of the farm, an unshakable reminder that once awakened, some nightmares never truly let go. The Thompson farm remained abandoned, but the darkness inside it waited patiently, longing for the next curious soul to awaken it once more. The unseen guest. Megan had always loved her quaint little cottage nestled at the edge of the woods. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the chaos of the city and immerse herself in nature. However, as the days grew shorter and the nights grew longer, an unsettling feeling began to creep into her haven. It started with small things: a creaking floorboard when no one was there, a chill in the air that sent shivers down her spine. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination, the product of a vivid mind and the solitude of the countryside. But as the nights wore on, the sensations intensified. One evening, as Megan settled into her favorite armchair with a cup of tea and a good book, she felt a distinct presence in the room. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, and she glanced up, expecting to see someone standing there. But the room was empty, the only sound the crackling of the fire. "Just the wind," she muttered to herself, trying to shake off the feeling. Yet, as she returned to her book, she couldn't shake the sensation that she was being watched. The next night, while preparing for bed, Megan noticed an old family portrait hanging on the wall. It depicted a woman who had lived in the cottage long before her, with a serene expression that seemed to follow her. Megan felt a shiver run through her as she turned away, dismissing it as a trick of the light. But when she climbed into bed, she heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, like a gentle breeze brushing against her ear. "Megan!" Her heart raced. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. The room fell silent, and she felt a wave of dread wash over her. She pulled the covers tightly around her, trying to convince herself that it was just her imagination. The following days were filled with inexplicable occurrences. Doors would creak open on their own, and shadows flickered in the corners of her vision. She started to hear footsteps echoing in the hallway at night, always just out of sight. Each night, the whispers grew clearer, calling her name like a siren's song. One particularly stormy night, Megan decided to confront the unsettling presence. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, she ventured into the darkened corridors of her home, her heart pounding in her chest. "Megan," the voice called again, more insistent this time. She followed the sound, drawn toward the attic, a place she had always avoided. The creaky wooden stairs groaned beneath her feet as she ascended, the air growing colder with each step. As she reached the attic door, it swung open on its own, revealing a room filled with shadows and dust. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the air itself was holding its breath. A single window let in a sliver of moonlight, illuminating the room in an ethereal glow. "Megan?" The whisper echoed around her, now coming from a dark corner of the attic. Gathering her courage, she pointed her flashlight toward the sound. The beam illuminated a figure shrouded in darkness, its features indistinct. Megan's heart raced as she took a step back. "Who are you? What do you want?" she demanded. The figure slowly stepped into the light, and Megan gasped. It was the woman from the portrait, her face a mixture of sorrow and desperation. "I am Eliza," she said, her voice soft yet haunting. "I lived here long ago. I need your help." Megan felt a chill run through her. "Help? Why are you here?" Eliza's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I cannot move on. There is something left undone, a secret buried with me. You must uncover it." Fear gripped Megan, but curiosity edged her on. "What secret?" "The locket," Eliza whispered, her voice trembling. "It was hidden in this house. Find it, and you will release me." The air around Megan shifted, the shadows swirling with an energy that felt suffocating. "Where do I find it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Below," Eliza replied, pointing toward the floor. "In the cellar." Without thinking, Megan nodded, feeling an inexplicable connection to the spirit before her. "I'll find it, I promise." As Eliza's form began to fade, Megan felt a rush of determination. She descended the stairs to the cellar, her flashlight illuminating the damp stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, and the atmosphere felt heavy with anticipation. She rummaged through boxes and old furniture, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, among the cobwebs and dust, she spotted a small, ornate box half buried beneath a pile of old blankets. With trembling hands, she pulled it out, her breath hitching in her throat. Inside lay a delicate locket, tarnished with age but still beautiful. Megan felt the energy radiating from it, a warmth that enveloped her. She opened it to reveal a faded photograph of Eliza and a man whose eyes sparkled with love. A moment frozen in time. "Thank you," Eliza's voice echoed in her mind, soft but powerful. "You have freed me." Suddenly, the shadows in the cellar seemed to lift, and a wave of relief washed over Megan. The locket glowed faintly in her hand, and she felt a sense of peace settle within her. When she returned to the attic, she found it empty. The oppressive atmosphere lifted. The whispers had ceased, and in their place was a profound silence filled with gratitude. Megan knew she had set Eliza's spirit free. As she left the attic, she felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The unseen guest had become a cherished memory, one that reminded her of the power of love and the importance of letting go. From that day forward, the cottage felt different, warmer, more alive. And though the whispers had faded, Megan often felt a gentle presence beside her, a reminder that some spirits linger on, watching over those they love her. The old photograph. Emily had always been fascinated by her grandmother's stories about their family history. As a child, she would sit at her feet, enraptured by tales of distant relatives and long-forgotten secrets. After her grandmother passed away, Emily inherited a box filled with old photographs, letters, and trinkets from the past. Among them was a single photograph that stood out, a faded black and white image of a woman standing in front of a grand, crumbling mansion. The woman in the photo bore an uncanny resemblance to Emily herself, with the same sharp features and dark hair. Intrigued, she turned the photo over, but there were no names or dates, just a strange symbol etched into the corner. The sight sent a shiver down her spine, but her curiosity overpowered her unease. That night, unable to shake the feeling of the photograph, Emily placed it on her bedside table. As she drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of the mansion, its ornate architecture looming like a shadow over her. The woman in the photograph beckoned to her, but just as she reached out, the dream faded, leaving her feeling unsettled. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Emily started hearing whispers at night, soft and unintelligible, as if someone were trying to speak to her from beyond. Objects in her home shifted subtly, and she would sometimes catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of her eye, always just a fleeting shadow. Determined to uncover the truth behind the photograph, Emily began researching her family history. She learned that the mansion in the image was known as Blackwood Manor, a place long abandoned and shrouded in mystery. The last known owner had vanished without a trace, and rumors swirled about dark rituals and haunting spirits. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, Emily decided to visit Blackwood Manor. Armed with her camera and a flashlight, she made her way to the mansion, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the overgrown path. As she approached the entrance, a chill swept through the air, and the hairs on her arms stood on end. Inside, the mansion was a shell of its former glory. Dust covered every surface, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Emily felt an inexplicable pull toward the grand staircase, the same staircase that appeared in the photograph. She climbed the steps, her heart pounding in her chest as she reached the second floor. There, she found a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she stepped into a dimly lit room, cluttered with broken furniture and tattered drapes. In the center stood an ornate mirror, its surface clouded and cracked. As she approached, she noticed a familiar symbol etched into the frame, the same one from the photograph. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and the whispers returned, louder this time. "Help me, please." Emily's heart raced as she turned to the mirror, and for a fleeting moment, she saw the woman from the photograph standing behind her. Panic surged through her as the figure reached out, desperate and sorrowful. "You must find it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The truth is hidden." Before Emily could respond, the figure vanished, and the whispers grew frantic. Driven by an overwhelming urge, she began to search the room, rifling through the debris until she stumbled upon a small, ornate box hidden beneath a pile of dust-covered fabric. With trembling hands, she opened the box to reveal an old journal, its pages yellowed and fragile. As she flipped through the entries, she realized they belonged to the woman in the photograph, her ancestor. The journal detailed a series of strange occurrences leading up to the woman's disappearance, including mentions of a forbidden ritual meant to grant immortality. The final entry chilled Emily to the bone. It spoke of a sacrifice, a need for a host to carry on the woman's essence. "If you find this, know that I am trapped. You are my only hope," it read. Suddenly, the room grew darker, and shadows began to swirl around her. The air felt heavy, suffocating. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice echoed, deep and menacing. "You're just like her." Terrified, Emily ran toward the door, but it slammed shut before she could escape. The whispers turned into screams, and the shadows coiled around her, cold and clinging. "You will be mine," the voice roared, and Emily felt a force pulling her toward the mirror. In a moment of desperation, she clutched the journal and yelled, "I won't let you take me!" Summoning every ounce of strength, she hurled the journal at the mirror, shattering the glass into 1,000 pieces. As the shards fell, the shadows shrieked in agony, dissipating into the air. The room began to shimmer, and Emily felt herself being pulled back, the oppressive weight lifting from her shoulders. She staggered back, gasping for breath as the door flew open, allowing light to flood the room. Fleeing the mansion, Emily didn't stop until she reached the safety of her car. Heart racing, she glanced back at Blackwood Manor, now just a dark silhouette against the fading light. She knew she had escaped, but the experience left her shaken. That night, as she tried to sleep, the photograph lay on her bedside table. She couldn't help but notice how the woman's expression seemed to shift, a mixture of gratitude and longing in her gaze. The whispers had faded, but Emily felt an unsettling connection to her ancestor. In the weeks that followed, she kept the photograph close, a reminder of the danger that lurked within the past. Though the whispers had ceased, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the woman would always be there, watching and waiting for the moment when she might again seek a host to carry on her legacy. A legacy steeped in darkness. The Vengeful Spirit. In the small town of Hollow Creek, tales of a vengeful spirit haunted the locals. They spoke of a woman named Clara, who had lived in an old, crumbling house at the edge of the forest. Years ago, she was wrongfully accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake, her cries for justice echoing through the night. Since then, it was said that her spirit roamed the town, seeking retribution against those who had wronged her. When Sarah moved to Hollow Creek, she was unaware of the town's dark history. Fresh from college, she was excited to start her new job as a teacher at the local school. The charming facade of the town quickly faded as she heard whispers of Clara's tale during her first week. Skeptical and curious, Sarah decided to investigate the legend for herself. One evening, she ventured to Clara's old house, drawn by an inexplicable urge. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the dilapidated structure. As she approached, a chill ran down her spine, and the wind seemed to whisper her name. Ignoring the warning signs, she stepped inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the floor creaked under her weight. As she wandered through the rooms, she felt a sense of unease, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. In the corner of what had once been a living room, she spotted a faded portrait of Clara. The woman's eyes seemed to follow her, filled with sorrow and anger. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the house, extinguishing her flashlight. Panic surged in Sarah as she fumbled to turn it back on. When the beam flickered to life, she gasped. The portrait of Clara had changed. Now, the woman looked furious, her mouth twisted into a silent scream. Heart pounding, Sarah turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. "Let me out!" she cried, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder, and she felt a presence closing in around her, suffocating her with dread. "Who dares disturb my rest?" A voice echoed through the darkness, low and ominous. The walls seemed to pulse with energy as Clara's vengeful spirit materialized before her, ethereal and terrifying. I'm just a teacher. I didn't mean to intrude," Sarah stammered, backing away. "I wanted to learn about you." "Learn?" Clara hissed, her eyes glowing like embers. "You seek to uncover my pain, but you know nothing of my suffering. You, like those who came before, are nothing but a coward." "No, please," Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I want to help you. I want to understand." The spirit's expression softened for a fleeting moment, but then rage returned, twisting her features. "Help? You cannot help the dead. You can only join them." With a wave of her hand, Clara summoned shadows that swirled around Sarah, pulling her into the depths of despair. Memories of the past filled the air, screams, fire, and the faces of those who had condemned Clara to her fate. Sarah felt their pain and anguish, and it overwhelmed her. "I didn't know. I'm sorry," Sarah cried out, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on her. "I'll make it right. I promise." Clara paused, her form flickering as if caught between two worlds. "You think you can change what has been done? You think you can erase the scars of betrayal? I can try," Sarah shouted, desperation fueling her resolve. "I'll tell your story. I'll make sure no one forgets what happened to you." For a moment, silence enveloped the room. Clara's spirit hovered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "You would risk your life for a ghost's tale?" "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice resolute. "You deserve justice, and I will do everything I can to honor your memory." The shadows hesitated, swirling around her but slowly receding. Clara's expression shifted, the fury in her eyes fading to sorrow. "You are brave, child. Perhaps you are worthy of my trust." With a wave of her hand, the door creaked open, releasing Sarah from the suffocating grip of the house. As she stumbled outside, the chill in the air lifted, and the oppressive weight vanished. In the following weeks, Sarah dedicated herself to uncovering Clara's story. She researched the town's history, interviewed locals, and gathered evidence of the injustices that had been buried for too long. The more she learned, the more determined she became to ensure Clara's tale would never be forgotten. Finally, Sarah organized a memorial event at the town square, inviting residents to come and learn about Clara's tragic fate. She spoke passionately about the horrors of the past and the importance of recognizing the pain that lingered in their community. As she finished her speech, a warm breeze swept through the square, and Sarah felt a presence beside her. Turning, she saw Clara's spirit standing at the edge of the crowd, her expression serene. The townsfolk, moved by the story, began to speak of their own ancestors, of the mistakes and injustices of the past. In that moment, Clara smiled, her anger dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Sarah felt a rush of gratitude wash over her, knowing she had honored the spirit's memory. And as the days passed, the whispers in Hollow Creek transformed from fearful tales of a vengeful spirit to stories of resilience, healing, and the importance of remembering the past. Clara's spirit, no longer bound by rage, found peace at last, her legacy living on through the hearts of those who had listened and learned. After the memorial event, the air in Hollow Creek felt lighter, and the townspeople began to come together in ways they hadn't in years. Clara's story, once shrouded in darkness and fear, had sparked a newfound sense of community and purpose. People began to share their own family histories, recounting tales of hardship, resilience, and, in some cases, injustice. It was as if Clara's spirit had ignited a flame of empathy and understanding among them. Sarah found herself at the center of this movement, leading discussions and organizing gatherings. She created a small group dedicated to uncovering and preserving the town's history, ensuring that the stories of those who had suffered were remembered and honored. The more she learned about Clara, the more she felt connected to her, as if their spirits were intertwined. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah often visited the old house where Clara had once lived. Each time, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The shadows that had once threatened her now felt like echoes of the past, no longer filled with malice but rather with a sense of closure. She would sit on the front porch, writing in her journal about the progress they were making in the community and reflecting on her own journey. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Sarah decided to stay a little longer at the house. She brought her old guitar, hoping to play a few songs in the tranquil setting. As she strummed the strings, the melody carried through the air, and she felt a presence beside her. "Thank you, Sarah," a soft voice whispered, and she turned to see Clara's spirit standing nearby, her ethereal form glowing softly in the fading light. "You're welcome, Clara," Sarah replied, her heart swelling with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you. You deserve this peace." Clara smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from her. "You have brought my story to life. You've shown the town that we are more than our pasts. We are a tapestry of experiences, woven together by the threads of love and pain." As they spoke, Sarah could feel the energy in the air shift, a powerful force that seemed to connect them both. Clara continued, "There are others who need your help, Sarah. Not all spirits find peace as I have. Some remain bound by their traumas, waiting for someone to hear their stories." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? Who else is there?" "There are restless souls in this town, hidden away in the shadows, waiting for the light of understanding to reach them. You have the power to help them, just as you helped me." The weight of Clara's words hung in the air, and Sarah realized the responsibility that lay ahead. She had touched Clara's spirit and found a way to honor her memory, but now it seemed she was being called to a greater purpose. "Okay," Sarah said, determination filling her voice. "I will help them. I'll do whatever it takes." Clara nodded, her spirit shimmering like a candle flame. "Remember, the past is not simply a series of events. It's a living entity. Each story holds power, waiting to be released. You must listen, and you must believe." With that, Clara's figure began to fade, but her presence lingered like a warm embrace. Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose as she gathered her things and made her way home, the moon illuminating her path. In the following weeks, Sarah dedicated herself to listening. She spent time with the elders of Hollow Creek, collecting stories that had long been buried. Each tale revealed hidden truths about the town, stories of love, betrayal, hope, and loss. With every account, she felt the weight of the past lifting, and the spirits of those who had suffered were starting to emerge from the shadows. One night, while visiting a nursing home, Sarah met an elderly woman named Agnes. As they spoke, Agnes shared a haunting story from her childhood, a tale of a brother who had gone missing during a storm, lost to the raging waters of the river that ran behind their home. The pain in Agnes' eyes was palpable, and Sarah could feel the spirit of the boy lingering in the air, yearning to be remembered. "I sometimes think I hear him calling to me," Agnes confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "But it's been so long. I don't know if anyone will ever know what happened to him." Sarah's heart ached for Agnes and the boy who had been forgotten. "What was his name?" she asked gently. "Samuel," Agnes whispered, her voice trembling. "He was my little brother. I've never forgiven myself for not saving him." In that moment, Sarah understood Clara's warning. "Agnes, Samuel's story deserves to be told. We can find a way to honor his memory together." Agnes nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. With Sarah's encouragement, they organized a small memorial by the riverbank, inviting townsfolk to come and share their memories of Samuel. As they gathered, the air was charged with emotion, and Sarah felt the presence of Samuel growing stronger, his spirit yearning for recognition. As Agnes spoke, recounting the tale of her brother, the wind picked up and the atmosphere shifted. The whispers of the past could be heard, swirling around them as if the spirits were finally given a voice. Sarah felt a wave of energy as the townsfolk listened, their hearts opening to the pain and love that had been long buried. In that moment, Samuel's spirit emerged, shimmering in the light of the moon. The townsfolk gasped as they felt his presence, the boy's laughter echoing through the air like a gentle breeze. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice soft but clear. "Thank you for remembering me." Agnes broke down in tears, the weight of years of guilt lifting from her shoulders. "I'm so sorry, Samuel. I never meant to leave you." "I know," he replied, his spirit glowing brighter. "You were always with me." As the night wore on, the memorial transformed into a celebration of life and memory. The townsfolk shared stories of their own losses, their own forgotten loved ones, and in doing so, they began to heal. Sarah realized that this was her calling, to listen, to remember, and to help others find peace. Clara's legacy had ignited a fire within her, a purpose that would guide her for years to come. In the weeks and months that followed, Sarah continued her work, uncovering more stories and helping restless spirits find their way to the light. Hollow Creek became a place where the past was honored, its shadows no longer feared but embraced as part of the community's shared history. And in the quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the trees or the moon shone brightly over the river, Sarah could feel Clara's presence beside her, a gentle reminder that every story mattered and that love, in all its forms, could transcend even the darkest of pasts. The Whispering Depths. In the small coastal town of Eldermere, the sea was both a source of life and a harbinger of dread. Fishermen spoke in hushed tones about the ancient legends that surrounded the waters, tales of monstrous beings that lurked beneath the waves, waiting for the unwary to draw near. Most dismissed these stories as mere folklore, but those who lived near the shore knew better. They could feel the heaviness in the air, the subtle shifts in the tides, and the whispers that echoed in the night. Mara, a marine biologist, had recently moved to Eldermere to study the unusual marine life that thrived in the area. She was drawn to the ocean's mysteries and the untouched beauty of the coastline. However, as she settled into her new life, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. One evening, while exploring the rocky shoreline, she stumbled upon an ancient, weathered stone altar, half buried in the sand. Intrigued, she brushed away the sand to reveal strange symbols etched into the surface, their meaning lost to time. As she traced her fingers over the carvings, a shiver ran down her spine, and a low rumble seemed to emanate from the depths of the ocean. That night, Mara was awakened by a chilling sound, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls of her small cottage. It was unlike anything she had ever heard, a haunting melody that tugged at the corners of her mind. Unable to resist its pull, she hurried to the shore, drawn by an unseen force. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the water. As she approached the beach, the hum grew louder, transforming into an almost melodic chant. Shadows danced across the surface of the waves, and Mara felt a chill grip her heart. Standing at the water's edge, she gazed out at the sea, and her breath caught in her throat. Emerging from the depths was a colossal shape, dark and formless, its surface glistening like scales under the moonlight. Tentacles undulated and writhed, reaching out as if beckoning her closer. "Mara," the voice echoed in her mind, a whisper that felt both foreign and familiar. "Come to me." Fear gripped her, but curiosity surged within her. She stepped forward, entranced by the sight before her. The creature loomed larger, its form shifting, revealing glimpses of countless eyes and mouths, all watching her with insatiable hunger. "Join us," it urged, its voice a cacophony of whispers that echoed through her soul. Suddenly, Mara stumbled back, the weight of its presence crashing over her like a wave. She turned to run, but the sand felt like quicksand beneath her feet, and the whispers intensified, drowning out her thoughts. "You cannot escape the call of the depths," they chanted, reverberating through her very being. Desperate, she fled to her cottage, barricading the door and trembling in the darkness. Every creak of the floorboards sent jolts of terror through her. The whispers lingered just outside, a constant reminder of the horror that awaited her. Days passed, and Mara struggled to shake off the experience. She tried to focus on her research, but the memory of the creature haunted her dreams, twisting into nightmarish visions of tentacles and darkness. The townsfolk began to notice her frail appearance and the fear that shadowed her eyes. One evening, while reviewing her notes, Mara discovered a reference to the altar she had found, an ancient site dedicated to a being known as Azathoth, the blind idiot god, said to dwell in the depths of the ocean. The legends described the creature as a chaotic force, an embodiment of madness that could drive mortals to insanity. As the realization sank in, Mara knew she had to confront the truth. She returned to the altar, determined to uncover the connection between the whispers and the creature. As she knelt before the stone, the air grew heavy, and the whispers returned, now clearer and more insistent. "Mara, we are waiting for you." They beckoned, a multitude of voices merging into one. With each word, her mind began to unravel, the ancient knowledge flooding her senses. She could see visions of the creature's domain, an endless expanse of darkness filled with twisting shapes and lost souls. The beauty of the ocean twisted into a grotesque nightmare, and she felt herself slipping away. "No!" she screamed, shaking her head as she fought against the tide of madness. "I won't succumb." But it was too late. The depths called to her, a siren song that promised knowledge beyond comprehension. As she struggled to resist, a shadow loomed over her, and she felt a presence envelop her like a shroud. In that moment, she understood. The whispers were not just a call. They were a promise, an invitation to join the ranks of the lost. The altar pulsed with energy, and Mara felt herself being pulled into the depths, her body becoming weightless as the whispers enveloped her. "Join us, Mara. Become one with the void." With one final surge of willpower, she broke free from the grip of the shadows and stumbled back, gasping for air. The altar cracked and splintered as the creature's rage echoed through the night. The whispers turned to screams, and Mara felt the ground shake beneath her. In a burst of adrenaline, she fled from the altar and ran toward the shore, the waves crashing violently against the rocks. The creature emerged from the depths, its form twisting and contorting as it reached for her. But Mara was no longer entranced. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. "Leave me be!" she shouted, her voice shaking but resolute. With every ounce of strength, she willed the whispers to quiet, to fade into the night. The creature hesitated, its form flickering as if caught between worlds. As dawn broke over Eldermere, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the darkness, illuminating the ocean in a brilliant golden light. With a final roar, the creature retreated into the depths, the whispers dissipating like smoke on the wind. Mara collapsed on the shore, breathing heavily as the morning light washed over her. She felt the weight of the darkness lift, but she knew the battle was far from over. The whispers had been silenced, but the memories of the creature and its call would forever remain etched in her mind. Determined to protect her town from the horrors that lurked beneath the waves, Mara dedicated herself to understanding the eldritch forces that threatened Eldermere. She became a guardian of knowledge, warning others of the dark secrets hidden in the depths, ensuring that the whispers would never again reach the shores of her beloved town. And as she looked out at the ocean, she could still feel the stirrings of the depths, a reminder that some horrors may be held at bay, but they would always linger, waiting for the moment someone might be drawn back to the darkness. The phantom roommate. When Jenna moved into her new apartment in the heart of the city, she could hardly contain her excitement. It was a cozy one-bedroom unit with exposed brick walls and large windows that let in the morning light. She was thrilled to finally have a place of her own, far from the confines of her college dorm. However, There was one catch. Her roommate, Ellie, had already signed the lease before Jenna arrived. Jenna was fine with having a roommate. After all, it helped with the rent. When she met Ellie, she seemed friendly and easygoing, a perfect match for Jenna's laid-back personality. But as the days turned into weeks, Jenna began to notice things about Ellie that set her on edge. For one, Ellie rarely spoke about her past or shared much about herself. She would often disappear for days at a time, leaving Jenna in the apartment alone. When Jenna asked where she went, Ellie would shrug and say she had things to take care of. Jenna didn't press further, chalking it up to the quirks of a busy city life. One night, Jenna returned home late after a long shift at the cafe. The apartment was dark and quiet, and she assumed Ellie was out again. Exhausted, she decided to head straight to bed. As she lay there trying to drift off, she heard a soft whispering sound. It was faint, almost like a lullaby, but it sent chills down her spine. "Ellie," Jenna called out, but there was no response. She shook her head, dismissing it as her imagination playing tricks on her after a long day. Just as she began to relax, she felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, sending shivers down her arms. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "Help me." Heart racing, Jenna shot up in bed, her eyes darting around the room. "Ellie, is that you?" she asked again, but the silence was deafening. The whisper faded into nothingness, leaving Jenna feeling uneasy. She decided to brush it off as sleep deprivation and closed her eyes, willing herself to fall asleep. The next morning, Jenna woke up to find Ellie sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window with an unreadable expression. Jenna greeted her, but Ellie merely nodded, lost in thought. After a quick breakfast, Jenna left for class, the whispers still echoing in her mind. As days passed, the strange occurrences continued. Jenna would often find her belongings moved or misplaced, and sometimes she would catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure out of the corner of her eye. The whispers grew louder, now often calling her name. "Jenna, help me." One evening, Jenna decided to confront Ellie. "Hey, I've been hearing some weird noises at night. Are you okay?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Ellie's expression darkened, and she looked away. "It's nothing, just old memories." Jenna felt a chill run through her. "What do you mean? Is there something I should know?" But Ellie brushed her off, saying she was tired and needed some space. Jenna could sense that something was off, but she respected Ellie's wishes, keeping her distance. That night, the whispers returned, louder and more desperate. Jenna lay in bed, heart pounding, as the voice echoed through the room. "Jenna, please." Finally unable to ignore it, she got up and followed the sound. It led her to the living room, where a chill hung in the air. The shadows seemed to shift, and Jenna's breath quickened. She could feel a presence, heavy and oppressive, looming in the darkness. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. A figure slowly materialized in front of her. A ghostly silhouette, indistinct but undeniably human. It was a woman, her face twisted in anguish. "Help me, I'm trapped." Terrified, Jenna stumbled backward. "What do you want from me?" The figure pointed toward Ellie's room. "She's hiding something. She's not who you think she is." In that moment, Jenna's heart raced, and she felt a surge of courage. She had to know the truth. She approached Ellie's door, which was slightly ajar, and pushed it open. The room was dark, and Jenna squinted, trying to see inside. As she stepped in, the temperature dropped, and she felt a rush of air that sent chills through her body. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a tempest. "Jenna, help me." Jenna's gaze landed on a small trunk at the foot of the bed. It was old and dusty, sealed shut. She felt an overwhelming urge to open it, to uncover the secrets hidden within. Just as she reached for the trunk, Ellie appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of anger and fear. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "I need to know the truth, Ellie," Jenna replied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You can't keep hiding from this." Ellie's face twisted in an expression that was both sorrowful and menacing. "You don't understand. You shouldn't have come here." Ignoring her, Jenna opened the trunk. Inside, she found old photographs, letters, and newspaper clippings. Each piece revealed a tragic story, a young woman who had gone missing under mysterious circumstances, her name eerily similar to Jenna's. The last letter was from a family member, pleading for help, longing for closure. As the pieces fell into place, Jenna felt a wave of horror wash over her. "You're not just my roommate. You're the spirit of the girl in these letters, aren't you?" Ellie's expression shifted, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought if I stayed here, I could find peace. But the past won't let me go." The whispers swirled around them, growing more frantic. "Help me. Help her." Jenna's heart raced as she realized the truth. Ellie was a phantom, bound to the apartment by the pain of her past. "You need to let go, Ellie. You can't keep living in this limbo." Tears filled Ellie's eyes as she looked at Jenna. "I don't know how. I'm scared." "I'll help you," Jenna promised, her voice steady. "We can find closure together." With a newfound determination, Jenna took Ellie's hand, and together they faced the darkness that had haunted them both. The whispers grew softer, the shadows began to recede, and Jenna could feel the warmth of light enveloping them. "Thank you," Ellie whispered, her form starting to shimmer. "I can finally be free." As the last remnants of Ellie faded into the light, Jenna felt a sense of peace wash over her. The whispers ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, leaving the apartment filled with warmth and tranquility. Though Ellie was gone, Jenna knew she had helped her find closure. The apartment felt lighter, the shadows no longer lurking in the corners. Jenna vowed to honor Ellie's memory by sharing her story, ensuring that her pain would not be forgotten. From that day forward, the whispers transformed into echoes of hope, a reminder that even in darkness, there is always a path to the light. The Watcher. In the quiet town of Ravenwood, nestled between thick woods and steep hills, there was a legend that sent shivers down the spines of its residents. A tale of a figure known only as the Watcher. The stories told of a shadowy figure that lurked in the trees, always observing, always waiting. No one knew who or what the Watcher was, but those who claimed to have seen it spoke of its piercing gaze, which seemed to penetrate the very soul. Katie, a newcomer to Ravenwood, dismissed the tales as mere superstition. Having grown up in a bustling city, she found the small-town atmosphere charming and the legends quaint. She had moved to the town to start fresh after a difficult year, eager to embrace the tranquility it offered. However, as she settled into her new home, strange occurrences began to unfold. It started with a feeling of being watched. At first, Katie brushed it off, attributing it to her imagination. But as the days turned into weeks, she couldn't shake the sensation. It was as if someone or something was always lurking just out of sight. She began to notice odd things around her house. Her belongings would be slightly out of place, shadows flickered in her peripheral vision, and the air felt heavy with an unshakable tension. One night, as she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, she felt it again, a prickling sensation along her spine. Glancing toward the tree line, she caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow darted between the trees, vanishing before she could focus on it. Her heart raced, and she quickly dismissed it, telling herself it was just a deer or a trick of the light. But the feeling grew stronger. Each night, as darkness fell, Katie found herself looking over her shoulder, half expecting to see the Watcher standing just beyond the trees. Her sleep began to suffer, and she felt the weight of fatigue settle heavily upon her. One evening, determined to confront her fears, Katie took a flashlight and ventured into the woods. The townsfolk had warned her about wandering after dark, but she needed answers. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees loomed above her like ancient sentinels, their branches twisting in grotesque shapes. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath her feet. She felt the growing sense of dread, but she pressed on, fueled by a mix of fear and defiance. After what felt like hours of wandering, Katie stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a large, gnarled tree, its trunk twisted and knotted. As she approached, she felt an inexplicable pull, as if the tree were beckoning her closer. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a chill swept through the clearing. Katie's breath came out in visible puffs as she scanned the darkness surrounding her. "Is anyone there?" she called out, her voice trembling. In response, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and cloaked in darkness. The Watcher stood before her, its features obscured by a shroud of blackness. But Katie could feel its gaze, intense and penetrating, as if it was peeling back the layers of her soul. "Why do you disturb my solitude?" the figure spoke, its voice a low, echoing whisper that sent chills down her spine. Taken aback, Katie stumbled back a step. "What are you? Why have you been watching me?" "I am the guardian of these woods," the Watcher replied, its voice resonating with an otherworldly authority. "I observe those who enter, those who seek to trespass upon the secrets that lie within." "What secrets?" Katie asked, her curiosity piqued despite her fear. "The darkness that dwells here," the Watcher said, gesturing toward the forest. "It hungers for those who venture too far. Many have come seeking answers, but few return." Katie felt a chill creep into her bones. "I just wanted to know why I felt so watched, why I could sense something lurking nearby." The Watcher's gaze seemed to pierce through her. "You are sensitive to the unseen, are you not? You feel their presence. They are drawn to you, just as you were drawn to them." As the words hung in the air, shadows began to swirl around the clearing, coalescing into figures that danced just beyond the edge of the light. Faces twisted in anguish and despair emerged, their mouths opening in silent screams. Katie's heart raced as she realized these were the souls of those who had been consumed by the forest. "Leave this place," the Watcher warned, its voice a harsh whisper, "before it is too late." Panicking, Katie turned to run, but the shadows surged forward, reaching for her with skeletal hands. She felt their cold grip against her skin, pulling her back toward the darkness. The Watcher stood at the edge of the clearing, its presence a barrier between her and the souls that sought to drag her into the depths. "I will not let you take her," the Watcher shouted, and with a wave of its arm, the shadows recoiled, shrieking in anger. In that moment, Katie seized the opportunity and sprinted back toward the path she had come from, the forest closing in around her. The whispers followed her, a cacophony of voices begging her to stay, to join them in eternal darkness. Finally breaking through the tree-line, Katie stumbled onto the familiar ground of her yard, gasping for breath. She turned to look back, and the woods seemed to pulse with life, the shadows retreating into the depths, the Watcher standing sentinel at the edge. From that day on, Katie never returned to the woods. The feeling of being watched faded, but she could still sense the presence of the Watcher, forever guarding the secrets of the forest. The townsfolk continued to speak of the legend, but Katie knew the truth, that the darkness within the woods was real, and the Watcher was both a guardian and a warning. Though she had escaped, she would forever carry the memory of that night, a reminder that some secrets are better left undisturbed, and that in the shadows, there are Watchers who see everything, and sometimes, those Watchers are the only things standing between you and the darkness. The Last Train. In the forgotten town of Eldridge Hollow, tales of a ghostly train circulated among the locals, especially on cold, misty nights. It was said that at the stroke of midnight, a spectral locomotive would appear, its whistle echoing through the air, heralding the arrival of lost souls seeking passage to the other side. Few had dared to witness the phenomenon, for those who did often spoke of an overwhelming sense of despair that accompanied the train, as if it carried the weight of countless tragedies. Maggie, a curious young woman with a penchant for folklore, had just moved to Eldridge Hollow. Drawn by the stories, she decided to investigate the legend of the last train. The townsfolk warned her not to venture out at midnight, but Maggie's curiosity outweighed her caution. She wanted to see the train for herself, to uncover the truth behind the ghostly tales. One chilly evening, as the clock neared midnight, Maggie made her way to the old train station, now long abandoned and overgrown with weeds. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the decaying platform. With each step, she felt a mix of excitement and dread, the air thick with anticipation. As the clock struck 12, a low rumble echoed through the ground, sending a shiver down Maggie's spine. The atmosphere shifted, and a dense fog rolled in, shrouding the station in a ghostly veil. Suddenly, the sound of a train whistle pierced the silence, echoing like a mournful wail. Maggie's heart raced as she turned to face the tracks. Through the swirling mist, the outline of a train emerged, its carriages flickering like the fading memories of a forgotten time. The locomotive was adorned with rusted decorations, and its windows glowed with an otherworldly light. It stopped at the platform, the doors creaking open as if inviting her aboard. Despite the palpable fear gripping her, Maggie felt an irresistible pull toward the train. She hesitated for a moment, glancing around the desolate station, but the allure of the unknown was too strong. She stepped onto the train, the air inside thick with an eerie silence. The interior was dimly lit, with faded velvet seats and dust motes dancing in the air. As she moved deeper into the train, she noticed other passengers seated in the shadows. Their faces were gaunt and sorrowful, eyes hollow and filled with a profound sadness. Each figure seemed lost in their own memories, trapped in a moment that had long since passed. Maggie approached one of the passengers, a middle-aged man with a weary expression. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Where are we going?" He looked up, and for a brief moment, recognition flickered in his eyes. "Nowhere, child. We are bound for the beyond. This train carries souls who have unfinished business." Confusion washed over Maggie. "Unfinished business? What do you mean?" The man sighed, his voice heavy with regret. "We are the lost, the ones who couldn't let go. Each of us is tethered to our past, waiting for the chance to find peace." Maggie felt a chill run through her. "Is there a way to get off this train?" Before he could answer, the whistle blew again, louder this time, and the train lurched forward. The landscape outside transformed into a blur of darkness and light, memories flashing by like scenes from a long-forgotten dream. Maggie's heart raced as the realization hit her. She was trapped on the last train, and the destination was unknown. Panic surged within her, and she turned to flee back toward the door, but it had vanished behind a wall of shadows. "Help me!" she cried, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. The passengers around her turned their gazes, their sorrowful expressions deepening. "Accept your fate, or you may never leave," the man warned, his eyes filled with a weary understanding. "The train will only stop for those who are ready to confront their past." Maggie felt the weight of despair settle upon her. Memories of her own life flooded her mind, moments of regret, lost opportunities, and unspoken words. She had always been too afraid to confront her fears, but now, in the presence of these lost souls, she understood the importance of facing the truth. Taking a deep breath, Maggie closed her eyes and focused on the feelings that had haunted her. She thought of her estranged father, the fights they had, the words left unspoken. She remembered her college friends, the connections she had let slip away, the times she had chosen solitude over companionship. As the memories washed over her, she felt the presence of the passengers around her, their sorrow intertwining with her own. "I'm ready," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I want to find peace." The train began to slow, the atmosphere shifting as the glow from the windows intensified. The passengers around her seemed to illuminate, their sadness giving way to a sense of calm. One by one, they began to fade, their forms dissipating like mist in the light. "Thank you," the man said, a smile gracing his lips as he vanished. "You have chosen wisely." As the last of the passengers faded away, Maggie felt a warmth envelop her. The train slowed to a halt, and the door appeared before her, bathed in a golden light. With newfound strength, she stepped toward it, ready to embrace whatever lay beyond. As she crossed the threshold, the darkness fell away, replaced by a serene landscape filled with vibrant colors and soft whispers of wind. The train had taken her to a place of peace, a realm of acceptance and understanding. Maggie turned back for one last look at the train, now a distant silhouette against the horizon. She felt a sense of gratitude wash over her, knowing that she had faced her past and found a way to let it go. In Eldridge Hollow, the legend of the last train continued, its haunting whistle echoing through the night. But for those who heard it, there was hope, the understanding that even the lost could find their way home, and that sometimes the journey to peace begins with the courage to confront the shadows of the past. The Vanishing Point. In the quaint town of Maplewood, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life had always been peaceful. The townsfolk prided themselves on their close-knit community, where everyone knew everyone else. However, that tranquility was shattered when the first disappearance occurred. It began on a chilly autumn evening when Mrs. Thompson, the beloved librarian, failed to return home after closing the library. At first, her absence was brushed aside as a simple oversight. Perhaps she had gone out for coffee with a friend or had taken a stroll in the park. But as the hours turned into days, worry began to grip the town. The search parties combed through the woods, scoured the nearby riverbank, and checked every nook and cranny of Maplewood. But there was no sign of Mrs. Thompson. Her disappearance was a chilling reminder that not everything was as it seemed in their idyllic town. Then, just a week later, young Tommy Hayes, a bright-eyed boy known for his love of adventure, vanished without a trace. He had gone out to play in his backyard and simply never returned. Panic swept through Maplewood like wildfire. Parents locked their doors, and whispers of fear filled the air. The townsfolk gathered in small groups, exchanging theories and speculations about what could be happening. Some believed it was the work of a kidnapper, while others whispered about stranger things lurking in the nearby woods. Old Mrs. Jenkins, the town's resident conspiracy theorist, claimed that the disappearances were linked to the old quarry that had long been abandoned on the outskirts of town, a place filled with dark legends of those who had gone missing over the years. As the days turned into weeks, more residents began to vanish. Each disappearance was met with frantic searches and growing unease, but no clues ever emerged. By the time the fifth person was reported missing, the town was gripped by a suffocating fear, and a sense of paranoia began to settle in. Among the residents, a young woman named Clara felt a growing dread. Clara had always been sensitive to the emotions of others, and she could feel the weight of fear pressing down on the town. Determined to uncover the truth behind the disappearances, she began to investigate. Clara started her search at the library, poring over old records and news articles about Maplewood's history. She discovered that the town had faced similar disappearances decades ago, with an unsettling pattern emerging every few generations. It was as if the town itself was cursed, drawing people in only to swallow them whole. One evening, Clara found a reference to the old quarry. With each mention, a chilling feeling settled in her stomach. It seemed that the quarry had been the epicenter of the earlier disappearances. Despite the warnings from her friends, Clara decided to venture there herself, convinced that the answers she sought lay hidden within its depths. As she approached the quarry, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, and an unnatural silence enveloped the area. The once familiar sounds of the woods faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Clara could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her, watching from the shadows. With a flashlight in hand, Clara descended into the quarry, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The walls of the quarry loomed high above her, jagged and foreboding. As she ventured deeper, she discovered remnants of the past, old tools, rusted machinery, and signs of lives long forgotten. Suddenly, Clara heard faint whispers echoing around her, a chorus of desperate voices calling out from the darkness. "Help us, save us." The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she turned, searching for the source of the voices. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a tempest. She felt her heartbeat quicken as shadows began to coalesce, forming indistinct shapes in the darkness. "Help us," they pleaded, their voices filled with anguish. Clara felt a cold dread wash over her as she realized these were the spirits of those who had disappeared, trapped in the quarry's depths. Before she could react, a figure emerged from the shadows. A gaunt, hollow-eyed man who looked as if he had been trapped for years. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped. "The quarry takes what it wants, and it will not let you go." Panic gripped Clara as she backed away, but the shadows closed in around her, whispering secrets of despair and loss. "You belong to us now," they chanted, their voices blending into a haunting melody. Summoning her courage, Clara shouted, "No! I refuse to be a part of this." With a surge of determination, she turned and ran, the whispers growing frantic behind her. The walls of the quarry seemed to shift, the path twisting and turning as she fought to find her way back to the entrance. As she emerged into the moonlight, the shadows receded, their cries fading into the night. Clara collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, the reality of what she had witnessed settling heavily on her heart. The next day, she desperately tried to warn the townsfolk about the quarry and the spirits trapped within. But fear had taken hold of Maplewood, and many refused to believe her. They locked their doors tighter and huddled in their homes, convinced that the curse would pass them by. Days turned into weeks, and the disappearances continued. Clara could no longer ignore the feeling that the quarry held the key to their salvation. Gathering a group of brave souls who still believed in her, she led them back to the quarry, determined to confront the darkness that had claimed their town. As they stood at the edge, Clara felt the weight of the past pressing down on them. Together, they called out to the spirits, offering their compassion and understanding. "We are here for you," Clara shouted into the depths. "You are not alone. We will help you find peace." The shadows began to swirl, and for the first time, Clara felt a shift in the air. The whispers turned from cries of despair to murmurs of gratitude. One by one, the trapped souls began to emerge, their forms shimmering like reflections in water. As the last spirit stepped into the light, the quarry trembled, and a blinding flash illuminated the area. The darkness that had held Maplewood captive for so long began to dissipate, the air growing lighter and filled with hope. The townsfolk, inspired by Clara's bravery, emerged from their homes, witnessing the transformation of the quarry. The fear that had gripped them began to fade, replaced by a sense of unity and purpose. In the weeks that followed, the town of Maplewood began to heal. The disappearances ceased, and the whispers of the past transformed into stories of resilience shared around campfires. Clara's bravery had freed the town from the curse, and the quarry, once a place of despair, became a symbol of hope and renewal. Though the memories of the vanished would always linger, the townsfolk learned to honor their legacy, ensuring that no one would ever be forgotten again. And in the quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the trees, they could almost hear the echoes of the spirits, whispering their thanks for finally being set free. As the weeks turned into months, the transformation of Maplewood became a testament to the strength of community and resilience. Clara, hailed as a local hero, found herself at the center of a new movement to honor the memories of those who had been lost to the quarry. The townsfolk, once gripped by fear, now gathered regularly to celebrate their newfound unity and to share stories of their loved ones who had vanished. Clara organized monthly gatherings at the town square, where residents would light candles in remembrance of those who had disappeared. Each flickering flame represented a soul, a promise that they would never be forgotten. The gatherings became a time of healing, where laughter mingled with tears, and the weight of the past began to lift. Despite the town's recovery, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the quarry still held mysteries yet to be uncovered. With the support of her friends, she decided to delve deeper into the history of Maplewood and the quarry itself. They began to research the town's archives, uncovering old maps, diaries, and newspaper articles that hinted at a darker past. One evening, while sifting through dusty records in the library, Clara stumbled upon a journal belonging to a former town mayor, Jonathan Whitaker. The journal detailed strange occurrences in the town dating back over a century. Whitaker wrote of a series of mysterious disappearances that had plagued Maplewood every 50 years, each cycle seemingly tied to the quarry. The entries hinted at a ritualistic nature to the disappearances, suggesting that the town had once attempted to appease an ancient spirit that resided within the quarry. As Clara read further, she discovered a chilling passage. The quarry is a portal, a gateway to another realm. The spirits of those who are lost within its depths are bound to the land, and the town must pay tribute to keep the darkness at bay. With her heart racing, Clara realized that the disappearances weren't just random acts of fate. They were part of a cycle, a dark bargain made long ago. The townsfolk had unknowingly fallen into a pattern that could repeat itself if they didn't take action. Determined to break the cycle once and for all, Clara gathered her friends and shared her findings. "We need to confront whatever forces are at play here," she urged. "If the quarry is indeed a portal, we must find a way to close it or at least protect ourselves from its influence." Her friends agreed, and together they devised a plan to hold a ceremony at the quarry. They would gather the community, honoring the spirits and acknowledging the town's past while also making a vow to protect their future. Clara felt a sense of purpose. This was their chance to reclaim their town and ensure that the horrors of the past would not return. On the night of the ceremony, the air was electric with anticipation. The townsfolk gathered at the edge of the quarry, candles in hand, their faces illuminated by the soft glow. Clara stood at the forefront, her heart pounding as she prepared to speak. "Tonight, we honor those we have lost," Clara began, her voice steady despite the weight of emotion. "We acknowledge the pain and sorrow that has haunted our town for too long, but we also stand united, ready to confront the darkness and protect our home." As she spoke, the wind began to pick up, rustling the leaves and sending shivers down the spines of those gathered. Clara felt a surge of energy, as if the very ground beneath them was awakening. She continued, "We call upon the spirits of the quarry. We wish to honor you, to acknowledge your pain, but we also seek closure, for you and for ourselves." With that, Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a small pouch filled with herbs and flowers, a symbol of remembrance and healing. She began to sprinkle the mixture around the perimeter of the quarry, and as she did, the wind howled, and a dense fog rolled in, swirling ominously. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air crackled with energy. The townsfolk gasped as shadows began to emerge from the depths of the quarry, swirling and coalescing into forms that resembled the vanished souls. Clara felt a mixture of fear and determination. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The shadows gathered, their faces twisted in expressions of anguish and longing. Clara stepped forward, her heart racing but resolute. "You are not forgotten. We honor your memory, and we wish to help you find peace." The shadows paused, their movements slow and deliberate as they listened. Clara could feel the weight of their sorrow pressing down, but she also sensed a flicker of hope among them. "You deserve to be free," she continued, "but we must break the cycle that binds you to this place." As if in response, the shadows surged forward, their whispers swirling around Clara like a storm. "Set us free, help us," they implored, their voices echoing with desperation. In that moment, Clara understood the ritual had to be grounded in love and forgiveness. "We forgive you for the pain that has haunted us," she declared, her voice rising above the cacophony. "We release you from the chains of the past." With that, Clara took a deep breath and began to chant words of release and healing, calling upon the strength of the community and the spirits alike. The fog thickened, swirling around them, and the shadows began to glow with an ethereal light. As the chant reached its crescendo, a blinding flash erupted from the quarry, illuminating the night sky. The shadows shimmered, transforming into bright orbs of light that floated upward, breaking free from the earth that had held them captive for so long. The townsfolk watched in awe as the lights danced and twirled, finally ascending into the heavens. As the last of the spirits vanished, the ground trembled one final time before falling silent. The weight of despair that had clung to the quarry dissipated, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of peace. Clara and the townsfolk stood in awe, tears streaming down their faces, knowing they had achieved something profound. From that day forward, the quarry was no longer a place of darkness. It became a symbol of hope and renewal. The town of Maplewood thrived, and the memories of the lost were honored in a way that brought the community closer together. Clara continued her work, organizing events to celebrate the lives of those who had vanished, ensuring that their stories would never be forgotten. The town learned to embrace the past while forging a brighter future, and the cycle of disappearances finally came to an end. Though the quarry remained a part of their history, it served as a reminder of the power of unity, compassion, and the strength to confront the shadows of the past. Maplewood stood tall, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, forever vigilant against the darkness that once threatened to consume them. Whispers in the woods. In the small town of Eldridge, nestled at the edge of a vast and ancient forest, the locals often warned one another about the whispers that drifted through the trees. It was said that those who ventured too deep into the woods would hear them, soft, ethereal sounds that whispered secrets and beckoned the unsuspecting deeper into the shadows. The elders spoke of a time when the woods were alive with enchantment, but now they were a place of dread and caution. One chilly autumn afternoon, a group of friends, Amy, Mark, Sarah, and Jake, decided to embark on a hiking trip into the heart of the woods. They had heard the stories, but as adventurous young adults, they dismissed them as old wives' tales meant to scare children. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravado, they set off, laughing and joking as they made their way along the winding trails. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick with an unsettling silence, the usual sounds of the forest fading away. Even the birds seemed to retreat, leaving an eerie stillness in their wake. "Does it feel a little too quiet to you guys?" Amy asked, her voice tinged with unease. "Oh, come on," Mark scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "It's just the woods. Let's keep going." They pressed onward, but as darkness fell, the whispers began. At first, they were faint, just barely audible, a soft rustling that seemed to drift through the air. But soon, the whispers grew clearer, forming unintelligible words that danced at the edge of their hearing. "What is that?" Sarah whispered, glancing nervously at her friends. "Probably just the wind," Jake replied, but his voice lacked conviction. The group exchanged uneasy glances, the laughter that had once filled the air now replaced with a palpable tension. As they continued deeper into the woods, the whispers intensified, swirling around them like a living entity. The words twisted and turned, echoing through the trees, and the friends found themselves unable to pinpoint their source. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching them, waiting for something. Suddenly, a chilling gust of wind swept through the trees, and the whispers crescendoed into a frantic cacophony. "Leave now, turn back." "What the hell?" Mark exclaimed, his bravado faltering. "Did you guys hear that?" "Yeah, we need to go," Amy said, her heart racing. "This isn't right." As they turned to retrace their steps, the whispers abruptly fell silent, leaving an eerie stillness that felt suffocating. The group moved quickly, the path now seeming unfamiliar. The trees loomed overhead, casting dark shadows that twisted like clawed hands reaching for them. As they hurried back, Sarah stumbled, her foot catching on a gnarled root. She fell to the ground, and when she looked up, her friends had vanished. Panic surged through her as she called out their names, but the only response was the echo of her own voice, swallowed by the darkness. "Guys, where are you?" she cried, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers returned, now a low, mocking sound that surrounded her. "Stay with us forever." Fear clawed at her throat as she scrambled to her feet, her eyes darting through the shadows, searching for any sign of her friends. "This isn't funny," she shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of movement among the trees, a flash of light flickering in the distance. Hope surged within her, and she took off toward it, weaving through the tangled underbrush. But as she approached, the light flickered and faded, leaving her standing in darkness. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind. Join us, frantic, Sarah stumbled backward, only to collide with something cold and unyielding. She turned to find herself face to face with a figure cloaked in shadows, its features indistinct but its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Help me!" she screamed, but the figure merely watched, its gaze piercing through her. In that moment, she felt the weight of the forest pressing in around her, the whispers growing into a deafening roar. "Leave now or be lost." With a surge of instinct, Sarah turned and ran, the darkness closing in around her. The whispers chased her, clawing at her mind, filling her with dread as she raced through the trees. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sent her heart racing, and she could feel the presence of something sinister lurking just beyond her sight. As she burst into a clearing, she saw her friends standing together, their faces pale and vacant. Relief washed over her, but it quickly turned to horror as she realized they were not themselves. They stood motionless, entranced by the whispers that swirled around them. "Sarah." Mark's voice came out in a monotone, as if he were in a trance. "Join us. It's beautiful here." "No, you have to fight it," she pleaded, rushing toward them. But as she approached, the shadows deepened, and the whispers grew louder, drowning out her voice. "Stay with us." Desperation clawed at her as she grabbed Mark's arm and shook him. "Wake up. We need to leave." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the trees seemed to sway menacingly. The figure from before appeared at the edge of the clearing, its eyes glowing brighter, and the whispers became a chaotic storm of voices. "Leave or stay forever." With a surge of determination, Sarah summoned all her strength and shouted, "No, we're not staying. We're leaving." The shadows recoiled, and for a moment, the whispers faltered. She felt a flicker of clarity in her friends' eyes as they broke free from the trance. In that instant, they all turned and ran, sprinting back toward the path they had come from. The whispers chased them, now filled with rage, the voices screaming in frustration. "You cannot escape. You belong to us." With every step, Sarah felt the weight of the forest pressing down, but she pushed forward, dragging her friends along. They stumbled through the underbrush, branches clawing at their skin as they raced toward the edge of the woods. Finally, as dawn began to break on the horizon, they burst through the trees and into the safety of the open field. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of birds chirping and the gentle rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. Panting and shaken, they collapsed onto the ground, the sun rising behind them, illuminating the path that lay ahead. They looked back at the woods, the shadows retreating into the depths, leaving behind an unsettling silence. What just happened?" Amy gasped, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her heart still racing. "But we need to warn everyone. We can't let anyone else go into those woods." As they made their way back to town, the weight of their experience settled heavily on their hearts. The whispers may have been silenced for now, but the memory of what they had encountered lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lay within the woods. From that day forward, the friends vowed to protect their town from the secrets hidden in the forest. They spoke of their experience, warning others to stay away and to be cautious of the whispers that beckoned from the shadows. The woods became a place of caution, a reminder that some mysteries were best left undisturbed, and that the whispers in the woods were not just echoes of the past, but a warning of the darkness that could consume those who dared to venture too deep. The Doll in the Attic. In the sleepy town of Willow Creek, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there stood an old Victorian house that had seen better days. It belonged to the Hargrave family, known for their misfortunes and tragedies. After a series of unexplained events, the family had moved away, leaving the house to crumble under the weight of its dark history. One day, a family of four, Megan, her husband Tom, and their two children, Lily and Ben, decided to buy the neglected property, drawn in by its charm and the promise of a fresh start. They were unfazed by the stories of the house's haunted reputation, believing it was nothing more than local folklore meant to scare children. While exploring the attic, Lily stumbled upon a dusty, old trunk hidden beneath a pile of forgotten belongings. Intrigued, she pried it open, revealing a collection of vintage toys, clothes, and a porcelain doll sitting at the bottom, her painted smile eerily pristine amidst the dust. "Look what I found!" Lily exclaimed, holding the doll up for her mother to see. The doll was beautiful, with curly blonde hair, a delicate blue dress, and eyes that seemed to glimmer in the dim light. Megan hesitated, catching a glimpse of the doll's face. Something about it felt unsettling, but she brushed aside her unease. "It's just a doll, Lily. You can keep it." That night, as the family settled into their new home, Lily placed the doll on her bedside table. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a strange sense of comfort, as if the doll were watching over her. Little did she know, it was not merely a doll. It was a vessel for something far more sinister. As the days passed, strange occurrences began to unfold. Lily would wake to find the doll in different positions, its smile seemingly wider each time. At first, Megan attributed it to Lily's imagination, but as the doll's movements grew more pronounced, an unsettling feeling settled in the pit of her stomach. One evening, while tucking Lily into bed, Megan noticed that the doll was now sitting upright, its eyes staring directly at her. A chill ran down her spine, but she forced a smile. "You're just imagining things, honey. The doll can't move on its own." But Lily shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "Mommy, I swear it moves. I don't like it." Megan dismissed her daughter's fears and left the room. But that night, she heard soft whispers coming from the hallway. Groggy and disoriented, she brushed it off as the wind playing tricks on her. Nevertheless, she felt an unease that refused to dissipate. As the weeks went by, the hauntings intensified. Tom began to have vivid nightmares about the doll, dreams filled with dark shadows and whispers that echoed through the night. He would wake in a cold sweat, convinced that something was watching him. The children, too, seemed affected. Ben started sleepwalking, often wandering into the attic, drawn inexplicably to the doll. One fateful night, Megan was awakened by a loud crash. Heart pounding, she rushed to the children's room, only to find it empty. Panic surged through her as she searched the house, calling out for Lily and Ben. When she reached the attic, her breath caught in her throat. There, standing in front of the trunk, was Ben, staring blankly at the doll. Lily stood beside him, her eyes wide with terror. "Mom!" she cried, her voice trembling. "It's moving." Megan rushed forward, grabbing Ben by the shoulders and shaking him gently. "What's going on? Why are you up here?" "I don't know," Ben whispered, his voice hollow. "It called to me." In that moment, the doll turned its head ever so slightly, its porcelain eyes glinting in the dim light. The whispers grew louder, filling the attic with an unsettling chorus of voices. "Play with us, forever." Megan felt a wave of nausea wash over her, the air thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. "We need to leave this place," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. As she turned to lead her children away, the doll's voice broke through the whispers, clear and sharp. "You can't leave. You belong to me now." With a surge of adrenaline, Megan grabbed Lily's hand and pulled Ben toward the door, but it slammed shut before they could escape. The doll began to laugh, a chilling sound that echoed through the attic, sending shivers down their spines. "Play with me," it called, its voice dripping with malice. Desperate, Megan pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. In a moment of clarity, she remembered the old trunk. "We need to get it back in the trunk," she shouted. With a nod, they rushed toward the doll, but as they approached, the atmosphere shifted. The whispers turned to screams, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive force. The doll's eyes blazed with fury as it lunged toward them, its porcelain hands reaching out. "No!" Megan screamed, grasping the doll and yanking it away from her children. With every ounce of strength, she hurled it into the trunk and slammed the lid shut. Instantly, the room fell silent, and the door creaked open, as if the house itself were releasing its grip on them. Breathless and terrified, Megan ushered her children out of the attic and down the stairs, not stopping until they were safely outside in the cool night air. They stood at a distance, watching the house loom in the darkness, feeling the weight of the past hanging over them. "Mommy, is it over?" Lily asked, her voice small and frightened. "I don't know, sweetheart," Megan replied, her heart still racing. "But we're safe now." The family decided to leave Willow Creek behind, packing their belongings and driving away without a backward glance. As they left, the whispers faded, but the memory of the doll remained etched in their minds, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had sought to claim them. Months later, the house stood empty, the trunk still locked in the attic, waiting for the next unsuspecting family to discover its secrets. And somewhere within, the doll waited patiently, its smile frozen in time, whispering softly, "Play with me, forever." Reflections of the Damned. In the heart of the quaint town of Eldridge Hollow, an antique shop named Timeless Treasures stood nestled between modern storefronts. The shop was filled with relics from the past, old clocks, dusty books, and furniture that whispered tales of yesteryears. But there was one item that drew the most attention, a large, ornate mirror that hung prominently on the back wall. Its frame was intricately carved, adorned with swirling patterns and grotesque faces, giving it an unsettling beauty. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Abernathy, warned customers to be cautious around the mirror. "It has a history," she would say, her voice trembling slightly. "Many claim it's cursed. It shows more than just your reflection." Most patrons dismissed her words as mere superstition. But one day, a young woman named Claire entered the shop and found herself inexplicably drawn to the mirror. Claire was an aspiring photographer, always seeking inspiration in the unusual. As she approached the mirror, she felt a strange energy radiating from it, as if it were alive. Ignoring Mrs. Abernathy's warnings, Claire decided to purchase the mirror, excited by the artistic potential it held. That evening, Claire hung the mirror in her bedroom, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. She admired it, captivated by the intricate details of the frame. As night fell, she prepared for bed but couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was watching her. The reflection seemed deeper, darker, as if it held secrets just beyond her sight. As she lay in bed, sleep slowly creeping in, Claire heard a soft whisper, "Help me?" The voice was faint, barely audible, but it sent chills down her spine. She sat up, heart racing, and glanced at the mirror. The reflection shimmered, and for a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing behind her. A woman with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. "Who are you?" Claire whispered, but the figure vanished, leaving only her own reflection staring back at her. The next few nights were filled with restless sleep and haunting whispers. Claire began to notice strange occurrences around the house. Objects moving slightly, shadows flickering in her peripheral vision, and the constant feeling of being watched. Each time she looked into the mirror, the whispers grew louder, pleading for her attention. "Help me, free me." Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Claire decided to investigate the mirror's history. She returned to Timeless Treasures to talk to Mrs. Abernathy. The elderly woman's expression darkened as Claire recounted her experiences. "I warned you," Mrs. Abernathy said, her voice trembling. "The mirror once belonged to a woman named Eliza Gray, who was accused of witchcraft. She was tormented by the townsfolk and eventually trapped within the mirror as punishment. They say her spirit lingers, searching for a way to escape." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "What can I do to help her?" Mrs. Abernathy shook her head. "It's not that simple. The mirror feeds on fear and despair. To break the curse, you must confront the darkness within yourself and face Eliza's past." Determined, Claire returned home, her mind racing. That night, she stood before the mirror, heart pounding. "Eliza, if you're here, I want to help you," she called out. The whispers intensified, swirling around her like a whirlwind. "Free me, release me." As Claire focused on the mirror, she began to see visions, fragments of Eliza's life. She saw the woman, once beautiful and vibrant, being accused of dark magic, her screams echoing as she was dragged through the town. The townsfolk's faces twisted with hatred and fear, and Claire felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Suddenly, the mirror pulsed with energy, and Claire found herself pulled into its depths. The world around her blurred, and she was transported to a dark, foggy landscape filled with shadowy figures. Eliza appeared before her, her eyes filled with despair. "You must help me. They trapped me here for their sins." Claire reached out to her. "I want to help, but how?" "You must confront them. Show them the truth." Eliza's voice echoed, and Claire felt a surge of determination. With newfound strength, Claire turned to face the shadowy figures of the townsfolk. "You did this to her. You condemned an innocent woman," she shouted, her voice rising above the whispers. The figures recoiled, their faces twisted in anger. "She was a witch. She brought darkness upon us." "No!" Claire cried. "You let fear guide your actions. Eliza deserves justice." As she spoke, the fog began to clear, revealing the truth of Eliza's innocence. The townsfolk's faces transformed, showing fear mixed with realization. The shadows around Claire and Eliza began to dissipate, and Claire felt the weight of Eliza's pain lifting. "Thank you," Eliza whispered, her form shimmering with a soft light. "You've freed me." With a final surge of energy, Claire felt herself being pulled back into the mirror, the darkness around her fading away. She gasped as she found herself back in her bedroom, the mirror now glowing softly. The whispers had ceased, replaced with a serene silence. Claire approached the mirror, her heart racing but filled with a sense of peace. She could feel Eliza's spirit had been released, finally free from the chains that bound her. From that day forward, the mirror no longer held the same ominous presence. Instead, it became a symbol of redemption and courage. Claire decided to keep it, using it as a reminder of the power of compassion and the importance of confronting the darkness of the past. As for Eliza, her spirit lingered, no longer trapped but watching over Claire, grateful for the chance to finally rest. The mirror became a cherished piece in Claire's home, a testament to the bond forged between two women across time, a reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought within ourselves. Echoes of Hollow Hill Asylum. Nestled deep in the heart of the woods on the outskirts of a small town stood Hollow Hill Asylum, a sprawling complex long abandoned and shrouded in darkness. Once a place meant to offer solace and treatment to those suffering from mental illness, it had become a haunting relic of the past, its crumbling walls echoing with the pain and despair of those who had once called it home. Overgrown vines crept up the building's sides, and shattered windows gaped like hollow eyes, watching the world with a sinister gaze. Local legends told of the asylum's dark history, of experiments conducted in the name of treatment that crossed the line into madness. Whispers of ghostly figures roaming the halls and eerie voices drifting through the night kept the townsfolk at bay. No one dared to enter, fearing the spirits of the tormented souls who had suffered within its walls. But for a group of college friends, Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Mark, the tales were irresistible. Seeking thrills and a break from their mundane lives, they decided to explore the asylum, armed with flashlights and bravado. The sun dipped below the horizon as they arrived, casting an orange glow over the decaying structure. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked, hesitating at the entrance. The heavy wooden doors creaked ominously as Jake pushed them open. "Come on, it'll be fun. Just a little exploring," Jake urged, his excitement palpable. The group stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The walls were lined with faded photographs of former patients, their faces twisted in despair, as if the asylum itself held their sorrow. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon a room filled with rusted medical equipment. Old gurneys lay abandoned, and unsettling instruments glinted in the dim light. A chill crept up Emily's spine as she imagined the horrors that had taken place here. Suddenly, Sarah gasped, pointing toward a shadow moving in the corner of the room. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Probably just a rat," Mark scoffed, but the unease in his voice betrayed him. As they explored further, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. Emily began to feel a nagging sensation, as if they were being watched. The whispers started softly at first, faint, almost indistinguishable, but soon grew louder, echoing through the corridors. "Help us! Let us out!" "What is that?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The group exchanged nervous glances, their bravado quickly dissipating. "Maybe it's just the wind," Mark suggested, but deep down he knew something was wrong. They pressed onward, drawn by a compulsion they couldn't explain. As they reached the central hall, the whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tempest. "Help us! Stay with us! Forever!" Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the temperature dropped. Their breath became visible in the air as the whispers turned into frantic cries. "Get out! Leave while you can!" Panic surged through the group. "We need to go!" Emily shouted, turning to run. But as they hurried back toward the entrance, the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. "Let us out, please!" Sarah cried, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers transformed into screams, echoing through the hallways, drowning out their pleas. "Stay with us, join us!" In the chaos, Jake spotted a doorway leading to the basement. "This way!" he yelled, and the group dashed toward it, desperate to escape the clutches of the asylum. As they descended the stairs, the air grew colder, and the darkness enveloped them. The basement was a labyrinth of old rooms and corridors, each filled with memories of suffering. Shadows danced along the walls, and the whispers became a cacophony of anguished cries. "Help us! Help us! Don't leave!" Emily felt a pull toward one of the rooms, drawn by an invisible force. Against her better judgment, she stepped inside, her flashlight illuminating a small chamber lined with old, tattered journals. They were filled with the ramblings of former patients, their thoughts spiraling into madness. "Emily, what are you doing?" Mark shouted, grabbing her arm. But she couldn't tear her gaze away from the journal in her hands. As she opened it, a rush of cold air swept through the room, and the whispers intensified, surrounding her like a storm. The words on the pages began to swirl, forming images of the asylum's dark past. Doctors conducting inhumane experiments, patients screaming for release, and a fire that consumed the building, leaving behind only shadows. "Join us!" The voices begged, growing louder, more insistent. Emily felt her mind slipping, the weight of despair pressing down on her. She was losing herself to the darkness. "Emily, we need to go now," Jake urged, pulling her back. With great effort, he managed to free her from the journal's grasp, and they stumbled out of the room, the whispers trailing behind them. As they made their way back to the stairs, the shadows grew thicker, coiling around them like tendrils of smoke. "You cannot leave!" a voice boomed, echoing through the basement. "You belong to us now." The walls seemed to close in, and the group raced toward the exit, their hearts pounding in their chests. They reached the door, but it wouldn't budge. Desperation clawed at them as they pushed and pulled, but it was as if the asylum itself had come alive, refusing to let them go. "Help us!" the voices cried, their anguish filling the air. "Join us!" With a final surge of adrenaline, Emily slammed her shoulder against the door, and it flew open, spilling them out into the night. They stumbled onto the lawn, gasping for breath, the whispers fading behind them. As they turned to look back at the asylum, the windows glowed with an eerie light, and they could see shadowy figures watching from within. The whispers had become a haunting chorus, echoing through the darkness. "Come back! Help us! Don't leave!" Without a word, the group ran, not stopping until they reached their car. They drove away, the lights of Hollow Hill Asylum fading into the distance, but the echoes of its past lingered in their minds. From that day on, none of them spoke of what happened that night. The asylum remained a looming presence in their memories, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within its walls. They knew that the whispers would never truly fade, and that the souls trapped within would continue to call out for help, waiting for someone to answer their plea. Years later, when the town decided to demolish the asylum, the workers reported hearing the whispers as they tore down the walls, pleas for freedom and cries of despair. But no one dared to listen, for they knew that some echoes are best left unheard, buried deep within the shadows of the past. Bonus: The Twin Within. Samantha was an artist known for her vibrant paintings that captured the essence of the world around her. Her life was simple but fulfilling, spent in her sunlit studio, surrounded by canvases and brushes. However, one stormy evening, everything changed when she stumbled upon a peculiar painting hidden behind a stack of old canvases. The painting depicted a woman who looked exactly like her. Same features, same wild curls, but the colors were dark and haunting, as if the artist had tapped into something sinister. Intrigued and unnerved, Samantha decided to hang the painting on her wall, believing it might inspire her next piece. That night, as the storm raged outside, Samantha was jolted awake by a tapping noise. Groggy and disoriented, she glanced at the clock. It was just after midnight. The sound continued, rhythmic and insistent, drawing her toward the painting. As she approached, her heart raced. The figure in the painting seemed to shift, the eyes glinting with a wicked light. For a moment, Samantha thought she saw the painted woman smile, a chilling, knowing smile. Shaking off the apprehension, she turned away and returned to bed, dismissing it as a trick of her tired mind. The following day, Samantha noticed strange occurrences. Items in her studio began to shift. Her paintbrushes moved from their usual spots, and her sketches appeared crumpled and torn. The unsettling feeling grew, but she focused on her work, hoping to drown out the distractions. That night, she had a vivid dream. In it, she encountered the woman from the painting. They stood in a dark, shadowy realm, and the doppelganger spoke with a voice that echoed with malice. "You have something I want, Samantha. You've taken my place in this world." Samantha woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding. She felt an inexplicable urge to destroy the painting, but when she glanced at it, the figure seemed to mock her, vibrant and alive. Days turned into nights filled with sleeplessness. The doppelganger began to appear in reflections, mirrors, windows, even the surface of her paint. Each time, the painted woman wore that sinister smile, her eyes filled with envy and longing. One fateful evening, Samantha decided to confront her fears. She set up a large mirror in her studio, determined to face the figure haunting her. As she stood before it, the air grew thick with tension. "You don't belong here," she shouted, her voice trembling. "You're just a painting." In response, the reflection began to shimmer, and the painted woman stepped out of the canvas, her form solidifying in front of Samantha. The doppelganger was real, alive, and filled with a dark energy that made the hairs on Samantha's neck stand on end. "You've lived my life, taken my dreams," the doppelganger hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Now it's time for you to pay the price." Fear surged through Samantha, but she stood her ground. "You can't take my life. I won't let you." With a flick of her wrist, the doppelganger lunged at Samantha, but she dodged just in time. The two women began a fierce struggle, each grappling for control. Samantha felt an overwhelming sense of dread as the doppelganger's intentions became clear. She wanted to take over Samantha's life completely. In a moment of desperation, Samantha remembered the stories she had read about doppelgangers. They could be banished by confronting their darkest fears. She quickly picked up a paintbrush, dipping it into bold red paint, and began to paint over the doppelganger's face in the mirror. "No, you can't do this," the doppelganger screeched, her form flickering as the paint covered her features. "I am the one who creates," Samantha shouted, pouring her fear and determination into her strokes. With each brush of paint, the doppelganger weakened, her image distorting and fading. Finally, with one last stroke, the painted woman screamed, a haunting sound that echoed through the studio, before dissolving into a swirl of darkness. The mirror shattered, sending shards flying across the room. And for a moment, everything was silent. Breathless, Samantha stood amidst the chaos, her heart racing. She felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. The dark presence was gone. However, as she looked around her studio, she noticed something unsettling. The remnants of the shattered mirror reflected her face, but there was a flicker of something dark in her eyes, a shadow of what had just been. Determined not to let fear take root, Samantha resolved to reclaim her life. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the doppelganger had left a part of herself behind, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to return.
Thanks for listening to today's compilation. Please like and subscribe if you like to hear more stories like this. Stay safe, and I'll be back next time.